Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land. We love our peoples and pay respects to the elders past, present and emerging. Tonight we're excited to hear from an exceptional group of new Colombo Plan alumni, each of whom has made a significant impact through their studies and work in the Indo-Pacific region. For those of you who might be unfamiliar, the new Colombo Plan is a signature initiative introduced by Prime Minister Tony Abbott in 2014 with the goal to deepen Australia's knowledge and engagement with the Indo-Pacific by supporting Australian undergraduates to study, language training, internships and mentorships across the region. So the program includes a scholarship for up to 1 year of study, as well as a flexible mobility program offering short and long-term opportunities for study, internships and research. So joining us tonight, we have a pleasure to welcome our moderator, Jeremy Kai, who is a law student at the University of Queensland, who completed a legal internship in Chiang Mai, Thailand, along with our panellists, Crystal Paris, who is a senior consultant at PwC, who took part in a 4-month exchange program in Japan, Lara Trubell, a Bachelor of Education student who volunteered in the Solomon Islands, gaining invaluable experience in global education and community development, and Dominic Demora McCarthy, co-CEO of Pacific Australia Youth Association, who has studied in New Caledonia and French Polynesia and works in policy and diplomacy across the Pacific. Please join me as I now hand over to our moderator, Jeremy Kai.
Thank you everyone for coming. I think we've got a great crowd today. So I've been asking quite a number of questions to our panelists today. We'll start with a few general questions. I think we can just go from Dominic, Crystal and Laura, but going forward for some of the more nuanced questions, if anyone has anything to say, I think we can just go off the bat from there, okay? So firstly, Dominic, can you briefly tell us about your host location, what you studied and worked on during your NCP scholarship?
Yeah, so I'll focus on my scholarship. So I was the 2020 Scholar and Fellow for New Caledonia. So I went there pre-COVID to New Caledonia to study business at the University of New Caledonia and then do internships. As it was COVID in March 2020, I only had 10 weeks there and then returned at the end of mid-2022 for another 5 months to resume once the borders were open. So as I mentioned, I studied at the University of New Caledonia, studying business subjects in French. And then when I was back there in 2022, I interned at New Caledonia Trade and Invest and the Australian Consulate General to New Caledonia and Wallis and Futuna. I also had language training throughout my program as well. And I guess the reason for choosing New Caledonia was during high school, I studied French. I went to New Caledonia at the end of year 12, which was actually a new Colombo Plan program as well, run by James Cook Uni. Right at the time I was in school, and Queensland Education had sponsored some school students to tag along on the program. And coming from Mackay in North Queensland, where we have one of the biggest South Sea Islander populations here in Australia, there's a strong link with New Caledonia and the other Melanesian countries from our history of the blackbirding that happened in the 1800s. So there's, a link to my hometown. There's a link to my French studies, studying business as well. Always wanted to do a program abroad, and I always thought I would go to France. But then when I went to New Caledonia into school, I was like, this Pacific's where it's at. And that was about 7 or 8 years ago, and there wasn't as much interest in the Pacific as there is now. So I guess that kind of all contributed to my decision to apply for New Caledonia, and then did a couple of weeks over in French Polynesia as well, doing a mentorship program there.
It's amazing. Yeah. Crystal, I'll ask the same question. So tell us a bit about your host location, what you studied or worked there for.
Yeah, so I was supported by a mobility grant over in Japan for 4 months as part of my study abroad program with my university. I didn't undertake any specific internship opportunities through that grant. But as part of my time over there, I was invited to events and sort of engaged with and through various diplomatic channels, which was very beneficial. I chose Japan for a few reasons. One, I grew up in Melbourne, and I went to a school which was bilingual, and they taught us sport, music, art, and Japanese in Japanese. So I have been immersed in the culture and the language since about 6 years old, which is incredibly rare and special, I think. And then also studying a law and international relations degree. Naturally, Japan features quite a bit in a lot of sort of the trade, diplomatic, defense discussions and happenings. So naturally, it made sort of sense to go there from that perspective as well. And similarly, I guess through an international relations degree, the opportunity to study overseas and immerse yourself in a culture that is very different, a culture and a language that is very different to one that you've sort of grown up in Australia is and was invaluable. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that. Laura, same question. Tell us a bit about your host location and what you did or studied there.
I, like Crystal, undertook the mobility program, and mine was a community engagement organised by Melita Jones, a alumni for ACU, the university that I am with. So I didn't necessarily apply for the grant. It was a program that was offered to my university. And so I was a student teacher teaching in schools across the Solomon Islands in Honiara, and it was an invaluable experience. So I guess I decided to go on this program because I really wanted to learn more about the Pacific Islands education system and how it differs, or how it's quite similar to Australia. I learned a lot about why it's important to be really personable and why it's important to engage, in culture and with culture and people that are, really connecting with you on that deeper level. And I also learned a lot about my teaching and like why it's important to really not only value my culture in teaching, but also value every student's culture in the classroom.
Thank you. That's amazing. I think my next question was about what drew you to applying for NCP, but I think a lot of you already answered that. But I had a follow-up, particularly for Dom, seeing as so I myself also did the mobility plan as well, and we had quite a different application process to the full scholarship. So, Dom, can you kind of explain what or if you had any difficulties applying, or if you kind of just guide us through the process of applying for the scholarship that you went on?
Yeah. So I applied for, I actually went on the mobility grant in my first semester at the end of my first semester of uni. And at that point, I'd already started the application for the grant. So as soon as I started university, I called the international office because I had known about the new Colombo Plan from that trip I went on at the end of school, at the end of the year prior. And so I had knowledge early on in my degree, which not everyone knows about the new Colombo Plan early on in their degree. So yeah, contacted them. They said it was still a little bit early to get the information, but they would send me the application process once that was, I guess, live. Then middle of the year came and I first applied to my university. My university shortlisted and then nominated us to DFAT. It's changed a little bit the process over the years. This was back in 2019 when they only gave out about 120 scholarships at that time, and it's been quite increased last year, the year before, going forward. The government wants to really ramp up the number of scholarships. And so a lot of there's limits on how many universities could nominate students, and now it's a bit more flexible. And so I did the application process with the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trades. I got sent a invite link to a portal, and there you need to detail it's quite extensively like what your program is. There's 4 criteria, broadly speaking. I think they've changed slightly, but it's academics, community service, resilience, and then how you contribute to the objectives of the new Colombo Plan. So I really worked with my learning abroad office to refine my application, did over 6 drafts, I think, did mock interviews with my careers team to really set myself up. Picked a destination that I was both passionate about and that had only had 2 scholars go there in the history of the program. So I looked back on all the this is 2019, as I mentioned, and New Colombo Plan was launched in 2014. So I looked at all the New Colombo Plan scholars from 2014 to 2019, and I analyzed what countries they went to, and I just crunched the numbers on how many were going to the Pacific, and I noticed that there was only 2 scholars that had ever gone to New Caledonia, so I was the third one. So I had that kind of data behind me to back up that why it contributes to the New Colombo Plan objectives, which is all about diversifying. You've got 40 host countries to choose, but often scholars only go to about 15 or 16. So there's over 20 countries that no one's going to year on year. You know, we talk about Nauru, Palau, Marshall Islands, these countries that scholars aren't choosing for some valid reasons. If you haven't got the course, you can't go there and do your course, but also there's amazing internship opportunities that scholars could take advantage of who are from other disciplines. So yeah, I got through that DFAT portal stage with my supporting documentation and justifying what I was studying. I was already in contact with the University of New Caledonia to get supporting documents from them as well. And then waited for that to be assessed by DFAT and then got invited to the interview, which was done in person at the time. So I had to fly down to Canberra for the interview. I think it was a 5-person panel with a note taker as well. So it was quite intimidating. But they were very friendly and welcoming, and they wanted to get the best out of you. And then from there, just waited for the final result, which took another 2 months to come through. And then went to Canberra and did the pre-departure training and the award ceremony. So in all, it was pretty much 6-month process from the initial application for my university to getting awarded the scholarship. And another challenge as well is because I was in uni, the first semester of my uni. You've got to provide a lot of information about what you're doing at uni, but I had to draw a little bit on what I was doing, had done at school because I was still early in my course. And I luckily had a GPA already because I had done like an early entry program at uni. So those things helped me to put in the application in my first year and get the scholarship at that point. But if you're applying your second or third year, then you might have some more experiences that you can draw on. You don't necessarily have to talk about your school experiences.
Right. And so you talk about the interview process, and it has changed. I believe it is you are able to do it online, but not that it makes it any less daunting. And so would you have any general tips for applicants that do make it to the interview stage?
Yeah, I actually like that it was in person because body language, you can communicate a little bit easier. I went in with like a pink suit jacket, like a pink tie. It was like just trying to show my personality a little bit, and had all these different pins and things that I was just talking to the panel about, and they were commenting on my tie. So I think virtually, still like look the part. You don't necessarily have to wear a suit and tie, just wear what reflects your, yourself. Preparation is obviously the key. Knowing your application, know what you wrote on there. Sorry, if you wrote, something, and then the interviewer, the panelist asks you about it, you will be expected to respond about what you wrote. So you need to know what you wrote, and you need to know your plan inside out, so you can describe why you're going, where you're going, how long you're going for, how it contributes to the government's foreign policy objectives, and I think confidence as well in telling your story, bringing a narrative into it, sharing about where you're from. So I talked about how I was going to contribute to the NCP objectives. I did ballet for 15 years, and at the time I was still doing ballet. So I said, I'll go do ballet classes at the local school, which I had done when I had visited the country at the end of high school. I talked about church as well in the Pacific. Everyone goes to church on a Sunday, everything's closed. Talked about sport. Talk about joining university student associations. So think about how you're going to connect to the community of the country you're going to, and how that will lift Australia's profile and build our people-to-people links.
No, it's an amazing answer. Thank you for that. I want to ask a few questions, and I think we'll start from the end there now. I want to ask some questions about the impact that this program had on your professional and academic life. So how did your NCP experience shape or experience your current career path in international relations or public policy?
So I am in the field of education, so I'm definitely not going down a business route or international policy, but I definitely bring back my story that happened when I was in the Solomon Islands, and my continued engagement with the Pacific Islands. And I think it's something that has changed, like I was saying before, the way I teach and the way that I view teaching as like a parcel to get kids into the realm of the 21st century, which is learning how to engage with people. And it's going to go that way even more so as we continue to develop and the Pacific Islands continue their development as well. So I value people a lot more, and I value the time to give that conversation and that exchange as well, that cultural exchange. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Crystal, same question.
From a career perspective, I work at a multinational consulting firm. So I think, and the inherent nature of my work being in international tax, we're dealing with companies that have presence in a lot of different countries, and sometimes that involves dealing with people from different cultural backgrounds. So I think, as I said earlier, living in a country where sort of the cultural norms are different to your own sort of levels you a bit. You pick up on things that you might not otherwise have picked up on if you hadn't lived there. And so I think drawing on those nuances back in the workplace has been beneficial. I wouldn't personally say that there were any direct linkages in terms of I studied my international relations subjects overseas, and now I work in public policy, but also your job isn't your whole life. I'm also a youth advisor to the US Embassy in Australia. There's your policy lens. Like it sort of opens your mind up to, I think, participating in that experience and meeting all those people and hearing about different opportunities sort of opened up my mind to participating in different things when I came back to Australia. So yeah. And then I think from an academic perspective and just like a personal perspective, again, I think when you live overseas and you're not focusing, well, you are focusing on your studies, but you're also doing other things. I found it really beneficial from like a sort of work-life balance perspective as well. Like, oh, I can actually manage this study load and, do some travel and meet some people and do some other things. So yeah.
Yeah, no, that's lovely. In terms of like the academics, would you say the host country of your study abroad with NCP actually kind of does shape how or like what you learned when you studied abroad?
In terms of the subjects?
Or just like the culture of teaching or the culture of how you tackle issues or how you learn, if that makes sense.
Yes. Yes, I think that's the right answer. Yeah, I think I was fortunate to not have to take any of my courses in Japanese, so that was beneficial, although I can speak Japanese. I did take language courses. One interesting aspect when I was over there actually was that there was 100% attendance requirement, so you couldn't miss a lecture or anything.
Right.
And my university arrangements were pass-fail, which was fine, but it wasn't fine if you missed a class. So I think that definitely was interesting. I was always an in-person attendance anyway. Like I just prefer being there and learning. I think, yeah. I don't know if I would say that there was anything inherently different from like a teaching and learning perspective, outside of sort of the language courses, which of course were incredibly beneficial given that I'm in country learning language. And then through the our language learning, we got to do like little trips out. And so it was a bit practical as well.
Yeah, I think you fully answered my question. I think having 100%
Yeah.
attendance is, I think that pretty much wipes out a lot of my classes. Yeah, of course.
I was studying at a university, it's actually a French university. So you're in like a Melanesian Pacific country, but it's French bureaucracy, speaking French. So you go to class from 9 till 5 every day. And I was studying my business degree online back here in Australia. So that was a little bit different. And there's a lot of paper-based like printing out activities and there's a lot of tutorials and a lot of group activities. So it was very hands-on, very kind of old school French university style. A little bit probably not hasn't caught up quite to I guess international standards, but that's part of the experience, part of the culture there. Everything's a bit slower, a bit more bureaucratic as well because you've got the French bureaucracy added into it all. So yeah, it's really like there's such diverse experiences across the Indo-Pacific. There's 40 countries for NCP and every country is so different.
Do you have anything to add? Well, we're having an educational background.
Yeah, so I didn't study when I was in the Solomon Islands. I was teaching. But Don can speak of this as well. One of the biggest things that I learned is island time. And so even if you're ready, no one else is ready. And so the adaptability of it all, and I think that goes for most NCP experiences as well, is such an integral part. You have to be adaptable. You have to be able to go with whatever is going to be the next change. And so, yeah, like teaching and learning, there was a lot of teaching and learning on the fly.
Okay, thank you for that. Dom, I'll have you answer the first question again. So how did your NCP experience shape or influence your current career in international relations and public policy?
Yeah, so I studied business because I didn't really know what to study. I originally enrolled in fine arts dance performance degree at QUT and then moved into business at CQU because I'd done the early entry program with them at school as like my backup option, but then I ended up needing to use it. And then now I'm working for CQ University in International Education, but likewise, when I graduated my degree, I'm like, I don't really know what I want to work in. I don't really want to work for DFAT in Canberra. I don't really want to work in politics or government. I've got a bit of an entrepreneurial flair, so I was like, how do I tame this beast? So I settled on this job that opened up at my university that the study abroad coordinator had told me that this role will be opening up. It's a newly created role. I want you to apply for it. And so when I applied for it, I knew the whole interview panel because I'd done study abroad programs for the last 5 years with the university. And it's really been a nice role to ease into the workforce. I did a number of other roles throughout university, working full-time, part-time, juggling things in real estate, working for a member of parliament, working in hospitality. But this full-time job since graduating has been really fulfilling because I'm working across international partnerships and student mobility. So I feel that even though I studied business, I can still use the skills from that because I develop a lot of our study programs, our inbound programs. So there's always some kind of business development happening. I get to speak with our partners in different countries and utilize my language skills. So I feel like it's a nice fit. If you don't know where to go, international education could fit the bill for you. And then you can branch out as you progress in your career.
Right. And so I wanted to touch on kind of, I guess, the opportunities that arise when you partake in programs like this, or even the networks that you create. Question for the floor: if anyone can give any examples, I think Dom touched on one. If anyone can give any examples of people they met or opportunities they found that they were really able to take to heart because of the NCP program.
I wouldn't say that I took up any direct advantage. However, the networks that I have forged during my time abroad and since have been invaluable. The word of the night. But genuinely, a few years ago, I got to be my university's sort of alumni ambassador, which was fantastic. And went to a summit in Canberra. I think it was maybe the same year in 2023. It never ceases to amaze me who you'll meet at those sorts of events, whether it is like a peer, so you've both done your NCP experience, you're now working, whether it's students, whether it's diplomats, whether it's people who actually work. I think so. Palladium is the company that sort of facilitates the NCP, and just hearing about everyone's different experiences and opportunities that are available. There are also sort of networks, social networks that are maintained, and I know those networks often share sort of job opportunities for people to take up. I personally haven't taken any up, but they're there and available to people. And I just think if you're a young professional, you're a young student, and it's really important to take advantage of those networks, because it's far easier to say that you sort of were referred onto a job, onto a particular job posting, for example, through a network, rather than being one among 1,000 trying to apply for a huge company, for example, just taking it from that lens. Yeah, and I've met some really cool people. Like, I've known Dom for a few years now, and like I met him in this context, but we've also found that we have done other similar things, and so you don't know who you're going to meet, and you don't know where they will have been from. And similarly, is just another example, when I was over in Japan, Michael Hoy, who at the time I think was in the public affairs sector in the embassy, he was Bondi, and now I believe he is, I don't want to misstate his title, but he is quite high up, has a quite high up posting in sort of Brunei. I think he might be, I don't know, but it's just interesting to sort of see how the people you meet also progress through, their own journeys as well. Yeah.
We'll search him up on LinkedIn later.
Yeah.
I think one of the best things being an alumni of the new Colombo Plan is that they constantly offer more opportunities once you have completed your experience. And I was lucky enough to be sponsored to go and engage in Nauru at the PIA's last summit, and engage in more learning, more cultural diplomacy, and it was a great experience. And the NCP offers continuous yearly new opportunities like that. So yeah, it's a very great network to be a part of.
That's right. Yeah, it's a massive alumni network.
Yeah.
Right. I did want to ask a few questions about just personal growth, and feel free to put your hand up, whoever wants to speak on this. But in terms of, well, firstly, some of the biggest cultural adjustments you had to make. We've heard about island time, heard about academic standards in Japan, but if you really had to look back at your time, what was maybe one of the few, or like the largest adjustments that you made living in a new country? I'll start picking names.
I can go. I'll start with something non-cultural and just from like a personal growth perspective. During my time at university, and I still live with my parents, cost of living. But from a personal growth perspective, I have never lived away from home. So I think 4 months away from home for the first time in a foreign country was huge. I suspect that I might not be the only person in those shoes. I'm sure many other people have and will continue to perhaps go on a mobility or a scholarship opportunity, and that's the first time they're away from home. Also being in like a hustle bustle city like Tokyo, that's where my university was. So that was a shock, like being amongst all of that. But the other cultural shock that I had was I was living in the burbs, 40 minutes from the city, not a drop of English, none, absolutely none. And I could speak Japanese, but, you know, hadn't really touched it since high school. So a few years rusty. And I remember the first day I arrived, I went to the local 7-Eleven and just fully started speaking in English. So, like, just out of depth. And the guy behind the counter was just like glazed eyes staring back at me. And I was like, oh, wow, like, I really just need to take a step back. And like, I'm not in Tokyo. I'm not back home. Like, I'm in the suburbs in Japan. So I think speaking a different language every day of your life to the extent that that's relevant to you is huge. I'm fluent in Greek, it's my background, so I have 2 languages up my sleeve. Having a third, and then just waking up every day and being like, okay, I have to. This is my language now. Like, this is what I have to do. When I came back to Australia after the 4 months, it took me a little while to actually adjust back to not having to speak Japanese.
Wow.
So I think that was probably the biggest thing for me culturally, just adjusting to totally different language.
And would you say that challenge has kind of made you a better person ultimately?
Yeah, why not? No, I mean, yes. I haven't continued to, if you don't use it, you lose it. So for a little while when I returned on the Gold Coast, I'm Gold Coast based. On the Gold Coast, the Japanese society down there run on the weekend like classes, like Japanese language classes for free. And I used to attend those and sort of got a bit slack with it. But I think definitely challenge is good. I think challenge is always good. Being out of your comfort zone is always good, and you naturally adjust to it. And now I have all these great examples of how I adjusted to a challenging time.
It's an amazing answer.
Yeah, I think like I was living, Noumea is a pretty small city, so I was probably only 10 minutes from the city, but I was living up on the edge of Noumea, which is where the university is. And so it's not really well developed. There's mainly squats and things that live around there. So you have the university campus, and you have a lot of squats around the outside of the campus boundaries. And there's like one bus in that goes every 30 minutes, which is pretty good by Pacific standards. Like that's pretty good infrastructure. Yeah, it's just the having to be quite far from the city, a little bit difficult. I was living also, they have their on-campus residence structured where the international students are all put down the corner in the old building and all the local students put up the back in the new buildings that were built for the Pacific Games in 2015. And so you're kind of tucked away, out of sight, out of mind. And a lot of the students there are on the Erasmus program from Europe. So you've got like students from Luxembourg, Belgium, France. So I made Quebec as well. So I made some interesting connections, but they all just wanted to party. And I was there to really study and intern. I was taking it pretty seriously. So I remember like one Saturday at 6 a.m. they just got back from the club and I was going out for my morning run. And they're like speaking to me in French, they're like, we don't live the same life. I was like, no, we don't. So it's like just making friends definitely. You do underestimate actually how difficult that can be, even if you have a good grasp of the language. I did like ballet classes there, which really helped me connect with some people, but I didn't really make friends there. But this is more of a social thing. Also church, like it was a Fijian Kanak church, so there were some great people there. Some of the Australian diplomats as well were very friendly and always happy to catch up. So always nice to speak to an Australian. So I think friends is probably the hardest part of the culture shock and the experience there.
Right. Yeah. And I love how you always are able to bring your personal interests like ballet into what you do in the in international relations and public policy. I think it's a really effective way to show that everyone who have niche interests are able to apply it in some way and get a lot of benefits out of it. So that's really amazing that you took classes abroad. Yeah. Wow.
Touching on what Dom said, very minimal infrastructure in some of the Pacific Islands, And so my program organizer, Melinda Jones, wanted it to be a very real, immersive cultural experience. And so we lived in a women's refuge and we didn't have air conditioning. And so that was quite a big challenge really early on to adapt to the climate of the Solomon Islands. But like once we got over that barrier, we started to really see how like beautiful the culture was. And because being teachers, we got really welcomed into the community. And so it was really challenging to be able to really put on that teacher face sometimes because we were dealing with maybe heat, exhaustion. And so that was a real big challenge to be able to teach in this climate and also like maintain your own personal and social well-being as well. But apart from that and on time, I had the time of my life and I take back a lot of positive experiences from it.
Thank you for that. Island time will never. I was in Tonga for a summit with the Pacific Australia Youth Association, and that was my first encounter with island time, and it's something else.
We kept that event schedule actually.
Yeah, that's great. Operationally run well. But I also wanted to touch on how or if your time in your host country kind of changed how you viewed Australia's place in the Indo-Pacific or its relationship with your host country specifically. Well,
Happy to go. I wouldn't say changed. I would say more consolidated. There's a strong Pacific connection with where I'm from in North Queensland, so had some exposure to the cultures just through where I lived and grew up. And I guess my mindset probably shifted more at the end of school when I went on that trip. And that's where I was like, okay, the Pacific is our neighbors. We've got some shared history and shared future. So I guess that's probably where it really clicked for me. And then going on NCP just consolidated and reinforced that in many ways. Yeah.
Crystal.
I think similarly. I mean, Japan and Australia have, like many different sort of shared experiences, shared sort of ambitions. Obviously, they have a free trade agreement together. When I think of Japan and Australia, I love running. I have a running background. The Japanese love to come to our country to, for example, participate in the marathon. Like when I went to a few events in Japan, they were very heavily sort of sports focused as a sports diplomacy angle. On the Gold Coast in particular, when you go through the airport, there'll be a lot of sort of signage in Japanese because again, from a sort of trade and tourism perspective, there's that shared sort of desire for, heaps of Australians will go to Japan and heaps of Japanese will come to Australia. They love our beaches. Every time I told someone there that I was from the Gold Coast, they were like, woohoo, hell yeah, we love the Gold Coast, beautiful beaches. But on a serious note, like I think similarly, it just consolidated the fact that there's a very long-standing relationship between the two countries, there will continue to be. They're both very sort of sophisticated democracies. I don't think anything too shocking to anyone in the room here. They're sort of, yeah.
Amazing.
What was the question? I'm sorry.
So what, in terms of Australia's role in the Indo-Pacific region, how would you say your time abroad has either changed it or affected or influenced how we view Australia and its relation with the Solomons, say?
Yeah. So I think we are partners. We share an ocean. We share so much more than just an ocean. And so my program organizer, Melita Jones, she helped us raise funds when my group of pre-service teachers went over there. And we were able to put that money into building a library for the school. And so the next round of pre-service teachers, they paid for someone to redo their whole curriculum. And so I think there is so much shared knowledge in that. And since returning, I've taken up a placement in Bamaga in the Torres, like just below the Torres Strait, in Cape York. And it made me really passionate about EALD learning and teaching. So English as an additional language or dialect. And I think, experiencing what I did in the Solomon Islands really made me see how similar we both are, and about like why teachers are so important and why inclusive teaching is so important.
Thank you for that. Before we do get into the Q&A session, I just did have one last question, and we've touched on the alumni network. In terms of the NCP alumni, what do you all reckon as a panel the alumni network or the alumni as individuals have in advancing regional cooperation or public diplomacy?
Yeah, so a lot of alumni have set up bilateral dialogues. We've got like the Australia-Japan Youth Dialogue, Australia-China Youth Association, ASEAN Australia Strategic Youth Partnership. And then when I came back from NCP during COVID, I set up the Pacific Australia Youth Association. So we're a not-for-profit with 300 members in 12 Pacific Islands. So I think NCP alumni have a role and responsibility to play in connecting our either bilateral countries or regional, our regions of the Indo and Pacific through youth cooperation and youth events. And also alumni have the opportunity to attend a lot of these events through sponsorships from the NCP alumni. So I think that's like the power of the alumni is the energy and the ideas that come from it, and then putting those into action and actually setting up concrete activities and initiatives that continue from your time at NCP. Because most people do the new Colombo Plan either for 2, 4 weeks, 1 semester, 6, 12, 18 months, but then you're alumni for the rest of your life. So how do we develop the alumni program? There's, I think, 50,000 alumni now when you combine the mobility and scholarship recipients. So how do we drive the alumni forward into the future? I think it's through these types of programs and associations.
Exactly. And the three of you are here today, having an amazing panel as well. So I think that's a way that you could view it as well. Crystal?
Can you repeat the question, please?
So what do you think, what role do you think NCP alumni have in advancing regional cooperation?
The reason I asked for you to repeat the question is because I wanted to see whether I had anything to add to Dom. I don't really. I think he has hit the nail on the head, like those bilateral youth partnerships and associations that exist. They exist to bring people together, to bring cultures together, to drive discussion. I think if I can deviate from the question,
Sure.
Obviously, as you said, we're all in this room together. I think alumni also have a role to play in encouraging current scholars and mobility students to do the same, and those who are sort of wanting to apply for either the scholarship or mobility to do the same. We're all here. We're examples of sort of what a program looks like and what a post-program sort of engagement looks like. So I think there's avenues to be involved bilaterally through like the various dialogues, but it's also encouraging that participation with others as well, in country.
Absolutely.
And I think there's a power in storytelling as well. And so like sharing our stories like we are now. In doing so, I engaged with Rotary Australia And with them, I was able to discuss like what it's like living in the Solomon Islands and create a year 4 working group about like what it was actually like and what really affects the community there and what we could do as change makers. So I think in our own community, we are really big change makers by telling our own story. And I think that's really important.
Thank you for that. I do think we have some time for questions. If anyone had anything else to add. Excellent. Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Thank you all for that. And my name is Reese, and also fellow MCP alumni from Japan as well. And great questions, and amazing hearing all your stories and experiences and insights. My question would be that I'm going into my final semester now, and on the transition back into Australia, like staying connected with your country and overall the program in itself. Like I have been back in Australia now for nearly a year, and haven't had the opportunity to really attend those alumni events or get involved in the network as much as I'd like, or keep that connection to Japan and meet more of the other scholars. And you mentioned like the challenges, like making friends and the people that you meet in the country then, and then also like the direct advantage coming back as a scholar that like applying for jobs and seeking those future employment opportunities. I would just like to hear like how you guys navigated that and like the challenges that I have had like on the transition back into Australia from the program. Like I was in Japan for 15 months, so quite extensive program, and then to come back. I'm from Cairns as well, so North Queensland connection as well, and to study in Canberra, so all around, and then now in Brisbane. So I guess moving around as well, it's harder to make those roots and long-term connections. But just to see how you guys navigated, and I guess the transition back and maintaining the connection with your country and your program overall.
I'm happy to go. I returned from Japan during COVID. So I came back Australia Day of 2020. COVID was already in Japan. I was scared I wouldn't be able to leave the country. So the sort of year post exchange was very challenging for me because I went from 100% attendance at university every class to being behind a screen for the rest of my degree effectively. So that was hard. It also posed a challenge to, I guess, the immediate NCP networks because I just think in general, people hadn't had to think about ways to engage with people outside of like an in-person function like this. However, during that time, because everyone was in lockdown, I was actually very fortunate to be able to stay connected with a lot of the people that I met on exchange because we were all locked in our rooms with nothing else to do. I think, and then just to sort of continue, that was my challenge returning. So I can't offer you any consolation from the one perspective. However, once we came out of COVID, and I think NCP, together with other organisations and bodies, etc., found ways to host events like this one, where we're also dialing in virtually. It was sort of like I found that I was able to reconnect with people. As I said, I was also lucky enough to attend a conference in Canberra. So I think maybe also just right place, right time. Like you can't always control these things. But like, you know, we're all here. I'm available to chat. Like I know other people, I know other scholars that went to Japan and know other mobility participants that were in Japan. So, you know, I'd be more than happy to connect us all together. Like, I think everyone in this network is really sort of supportive and engaged and want to connect because we're all like-minded through our journeys and our NCP experiences. Yeah, I don't know if that was overly helpful to you, but you know, the challenges, I guess.
Yeah, no, like that's what I've experienced, and I think that like what differs the NCP like scholars is that study abroad is open to all Australian students, but I think that we would all probably agree that we want to like use those positive experiences and like that invaluable time living abroad and really apply it then like professionally, personally, into a career, and then also into the broader like Australia international relationship in the Indo-Pacific, and then yeah, struggling to find like a pathway how you can do that while still at uni and moving around different areas of Australia, and then deciding what to do after graduation as well. So yeah, thank you all for sharing.
My ad Reese, because I originally went on my scholarship in 2020 for COVID, and then I came back mid-March, and at that point I was thinking it was COVID lockdowns and thinking there's got to be a way to reconnect with my colleagues and friends in the Pacific Islands. And I reached out to two other NCP scholars, one who was in Solomon Islands and one who was in PNG, and I said I want to start a Pacific Australia Association. You're in, like, let's do it. And so we just set up a Facebook Messenger group chat and just added all our friends, about 20 people, 25 people from maybe 5 or 6 different Pacific Islands. Just got talking about our culture, food, language, a lot of organic discussion, grassroots. And then they stepped down and I kind of took the lead on establishing it as more of an association and have built it up over the last 5.5 years. But if you see that there's a gap, then you might be the one to, you know, there's also, fortunately, there's a lot of these organizations out there now, so you might be able to tap into an existing Japanese or Australian cultural organization, or you might feel that there's something that you could offer or you could create to connect scholars, maybe like regional Queensland or regional scholars in particular. There's a lot of us from regional areas. So yeah, if you've got an idea, you might be the one who could create something or try and tap into something that's already there. But yeah, you come here tonight, so that's a great starting point.
Yes, yeah. And I think like with Japan, and like you made the point that you're only the third scholar to go to New Caledonia. Japan is one of the most popular countries to go for NCP scholars. And then I was based in Osaka as well, so limited with a diplomatic network and like embassy events as well. So then that's another challenge. And the university I was at, Kansai University of Foreign Studies, it was dominated by so many Americans. So there was about 500 international students, which is a lot for Japan at one university. And then to like stand out as an NCP scholar, that like what differs you from a regular study abroad student from different countries as well, and then also being regional, opportunities are also limited in Japan and Australia. And yeah, so yeah, thank you.
Yeah. All right. Do we have any more questions? Yes, the gentleman.
Thank you very much. I've been very impressed with what I've heard. As a taxpayer, I always like to see evidence my tax. So thank you for that. You've each spoken a bit about the ways that you've had challenges to your behaviours while you're there, overseas, island time, etc. I wonder whether you've been in a situation where your underlying values have been challenged. Your ideas on things like ethnicity or gender or spirituality or individualism. Did you find any of those values being challenged? If you did, how did you handle that?
I went to New Caledonia, so it's very, there's been a lot of civil unrest recently and dates back, you know, in the 80s when there was pretty much a civil war. So I could actually feel the palpable tension between the different ethnic groups. And one time I was at the bus stop and Indigenous man told me to F off back to France. And I spoke to him in French, said, no, I'm from Australia. So, and then he completely changed and he's happy to speak to me. So I think as Australians, I think that just shows that we have a role in the region and how we can help to bring the people together. I don't think I necessarily did anything that maybe fixed that, or I had friends who are both of French background, Kanak Indigenous background, and also Caledonian who they're mixed. So I associated with all the different ethnicities there. But it's definitely something you can feel in New Caledonia, and it's actually a little bit tiring because it kind of wears on you the tension in the country. And I'm going back there next month for a project, so I'm really interested to see how it's changed since the riots last year or the year before. Last year, yeah. So I think I just did my best to become friends with people from all the different ethnic groups. It's particularly in university, it feels a little bit segregated. So it is quite different to what I'm used to here in Australia, where it's very multicultural, and I feel very that's it was a quite different experience. Yeah. So I just did my best to connect with each student as they were, who they were, and as an Australian, try and do my best to try and bring people together, because I didn't come from that political or socioeconomic situation where it's so rigid. So I think, yeah, just do my best to connect with everyone.
I think Japan. I think Japan is a very homogenous country, so I think to your point around, I feel like I'm going to go down the challenge route again. Terrible, but just I think as a behavior, like a sort of an observation of society and how it operates over there. It's a very homogenous country. 98% of that country are ethnic Japanese. So I think that was, to Dom's point, we live in a very multicultural country here. And so I think that was just an interesting, society to be a part of, and to observe how, perhaps for better or worse, that homogeneity translated into certain sort of interactions or behaviors. The other thing in Japan that was maybe different for me was the religious aspects over there. Very you'll walk around a corner and there'll be a shrine or a temple. I loved that. I thought it was beautiful, like all the spiritual aspects of Japan. I'm Greek Orthodox. Very different approaches to sort of religion and spirituality. And I think it definitely opened my mind a bit. And I think that was for the better. And I definitely came back and brought back a lot of internally, like for myself, I brought back a lot of those learnings of both religions in Japan. It was great.
Something that made me grow. When I was teaching in the schools in Honiara, sometimes the teacher would leave the room, the respective teacher, and sometimes they would come back in an hour, sometimes they would come back at the end of the day. And so, but they had like a very rigid plan of what was to be taught and what happened at certain times. And so I found myself teaching cultural studies to year 4 in a culture that I knew very little about. And so I started off the lesson very shocked, very bewildered. What am I going to do? And so I very luckily had a book about Brisbane. And so I shared something about my culture and I asked them to do the same. And from there, we got into a bit of learning and teaching and a lot of discourse around like what it is that they do when they go home, what it is they do on the weekend. And so I got myself out of it. But that was really challenging really early on, was, having that adaptability to be like, okay, yes, this is a challenge. How am I going to look at it? What am I going to do? How am I going to effectively grow and learn from there? Yeah.
Thank you. That was an amazing question as well. We have run out of time for questions in the Q&A panel, but we will have a short networking session that you're welcome to stick around for. I think I will just hand over now. Thank you.
No, thank you guys, and thank you very much for your insights. I really hope that inspired some of the young people in this study today to inspire or highlighted to others how important NCP